Hi everyone, my name's PK and here I have Michael and Nicole in front of me who are lovely people waving to you right now and they're clients of the Property Investment Accelerator. But more importantly, they're really successful property investors in of their own right. They have, I want to get this right, 11 titles and 17 rentals between them. Michael was an electrician. Nicole was a nurse, is a nurse, slightly, it's complicated, we'll get there. And look, they've just done really well for themselves, but it's been a journey. And so in this episode, stick around. We're going to talk about how they started investing, what got them into it, how their journey has been. Maybe we'll get through a lot of those properties and valuations and why they bought, why not, etc., challenges, and then sort of what they're doing now, what their passion is, their family, people. And so I think a lot of you guys will resonate with their journey. I know I did, and I'm very grateful to have them on. Welcome to the Oz Property Investment Mastery Podcast. My name's PK, and I help busy people build passive income by buying top 5% growth and cash flow property and build a portfolio using data without wasting months doing research, spending weekends at inspection or catching flights, or dropping $10,000 to $20,000 on buyer's agents every single time. So if you're confused, lack confidence, and just overwhelmed with all the information and marketing misinformation available online and don't know where to start, then this show is for you. Thank you, guys, and I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks, PK.
Thanks, PK. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I guess to start things off, perhaps providing some context, Nicole and I, we're both 34, and as you mentioned, we were able to build our portfolio over a 11 to 12-year period thereabouts on modest wages. And I guess if it's perhaps appropriate, maybe we start from the beginning as to how Nicole and I had different upbringings.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Yeah, so both our parents migrated to Australia from Poland, but completely sort of different terms, both in the 80s. My parents were sponsored over and they came over with my brother, who was 4 years old at the time. They were educated, they knew English a little bit, or at least they could speak English, and they had qualifications. But like some migrants, as you know, they don't end up using those qualifications and getting by. They need to do something to grow some type of wealth. So my parents ended up building a business, owning their own home, and I saw how they sacrificed working hard for their lifestyle. And like, for instance, my dad really only had Sundays off, right? But nevertheless, we lived really comfortably, and I guess it's very different to what Michael endured in his growing up stages.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, my parents migrated to Australia in the 80s. Mum was in hospitality. Dad was a fitter machinist by trade. And when they came to Australia, both of them did not know how to speak English. So they sought help from the government and basically went through housing. And following that, unfortunately, at a young age, my parents split when I was, I think, about 3 or 4 years old. And so I was raised by my mum as basically a single mum. And so growing up was quite tough because being on Centrelink, not having a stable job, we struggled financially. And so that motivated me to eventually pursue some level of financial independence.
Right. Sorry, I was just going to say as well, both of you have a kind of, immigrant story in terms of your parents. You might be going here already, but I just wanted to ask, did they kind of go out of their way to instill upon you that you should live the Australian dream? Because like we all experience it. The first generation does all the hard work and the second, third gets all the benefit. Is it because of them that you are property investors?
Yeah, it probably touches on that as well. But for me, it was the struggle of whenever I wanted to do something or go somewhere, money was always a barrier. And so I after having experienced that myself, never really wanted to have that barrier in my own life and moving down the track of when we started our own family. And so that was partly the motivation behind how things unrolled over the years that followed.
Yeah, whereas mine were a little bit more like, go to uni, get a job, and, get a good job kind of a thing. And then I think pretty much, well, I guess we'll dive into how we started investing and then that will unravel maybe.
Yeah.
The pinnacle points of mind change, right?
Yeah. I mean, have you guys...
Well, from just working 9 to 5.
Sure. Have you guys, I don't know if it's too personal question, apologies if it is, but because you've been investing for a long time, like 12 or 13 years, and you're only 34, like exactly my age as well. So have you guys been together for a long time and invested together the whole time? Or was it like separate, then, the worlds met?
No, yeah. So we met during school through the Polish community. So we actually shared some mutual friends who were 3 to 5 years older than us. And it was, I guess, through those friends that probably inspired Michael first.
Yeah.
To get into purchasing his first investment property, purely because I think they were getting into property.
So because they were slightly older, they were in essence, they'd finished school, and so they went to uni, and at that point they were almost at the completion of uni, whereas I left school. I became an electrician as an apprentice. And so what I realized was it only took me till 2010 where I started earning a decent income, and at which point our friends had already started in investing in property. And that was like, oh, well, they're doing it. That's kind of cool. There's no real reason why I can't do it. And so from that point, I worked hard to save myself a deposit of $30,000 and decided I was going to buy my first property. Now, the first property that I bought, I look back now and I kind of have a bit of a laughing moment because it was everything that is not what you do when it comes to investing. So to provide some context, I bought a property off the plan, which was a townhouse, 5% deposit down, and didn't have to do much for a 12-month period whilst everything was getting built. I got all the depreciation spiel as to how that was going to help and lower my tax and everything.
The sales pitch.
And so that all sounded like a great idea. I only had to put half of my deposit, what I'd saved, down on the property. And I was like, well, over the next sort of 12 months, I can save the difference to get it across the line. And I thought that was great. And so fast forward, I'd say probably about a year. I then reconvened after the property had settled. We got a tenant in there. Luckily, it didn't take very long to get a tenant in there, and we got the property revalued. Now, to my surprise, I look back now and I'm like, I was super lucky with how things went. And so what I mean by that is that upon revaluation, the property had gone up enough of an amount that I could refinance to then leverage into property number 2. And what I mean by that is I literally had earned more in equity that year than I was earning. So I was like, this is a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't we stop?
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, I was like, well, I did it in this area once. Why don't I just do it again? So
was that in Sydney?
That was in Sydney. Out Western Sydney near Penrith.
Right. Can I just ask you a question? Sorry, I know you, so I don't want to cut you off. But you know, like how you insinuated, as do I, that off the plan townhouses or apartments or things like that are often not the best decision, and you got sold the dream around depreciation benefits, etc. But then it actually did pretty well. Like, call it luck or call it whatever, it actually did very well. So there's like always a school of thought that says, why is PK, why is Michael, why all these like professionals, quote unquote, always hating on house and land packages and off the plan apartments, and when clearly they've done well, so how do you think about that?
Yeah, so
brings me to the second one.
Yeah, so
here we go. Okay.
There is a property that we acquired in our portfolio, which didn't do very well. I'll put it in it. I'll just wrap it in a nutshell. So later on in our journey, we basically bought or similarly put a deposit down on a apartment in the Brisbane CBD, which essentially we held for a few years. We purchased it at 425, and without getting too deep because I don't want to confuse the timeline here, we basically had to sell it at a loss. And I'm talking, we had it on the market for a little while. We were lucky to get what we did. And I think my memory serves me correctly, it was about a $40,000 loss plus the missed opportunities we had in that 5-year period.
Yeah.
5 years, well.
Yeah, but that was just like you said, you learn from your mistakes. And
yeah. And so after reinvesting into the second property in the same area and even the same suburb, I thought I could replicate the same thing again. And what happened was that, no, it didn't quite go as favorably. The market had already done its thing in those last sort of 2 years. And so we just kept things just roll. And at which point then...
Yeah, like Michael was like, hey, I'm investing. Do you want to jump on board and like invest as well? And then I thought, oh yeah, but I'm still at uni kind of thing when he was investing. And I guess because the first investment went so well, it was during the second investment we started talking about, oh, maybe, I'll jump onto the third one. Let's, so that he was like, well, you have to finish your uni degree at least and get a job of some sort. So I actually changed the course of my uni and ended up becoming a registered nurse just to get some type of reasonable income so that I could get some type of deposit, like happening and pretty much service.
Yeah, I was basically Nicole's here saying, look, just get any job to help with the serviceability side of things because I wasn't necessarily on a high income on my own and I needed assistance and being able to just join forces so we can borrow and purchase our next investment.
Yeah, so the next investment was it was a good investment, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so the next one was very different to the first two. And what I mean by that, it was a freestanding house in Western Sydney in Wentworthville, which is near Parramatta for those listening. And the intent for that property was it was very, very tired. We actually picked up the listing on, I think it was a day before Christmas.
Oh, yeah, whoa.
So everyone was in holiday mode. As soon as I saw the opportunity, I jumped straight on there to arrange a time to go and view the property. It was on a large block. So being from trade background myself, I was like, well, I know a few tradies. I reckon we can invest in this, renovate it, and perhaps do something with the yard in the future, whether that's to subdivide or add value in. Right? And so we bought that at $545,000 thereabouts, and got stuck into the reno. I quickly learned after the timeline that we had initially set blew out almost double. The budget that we set blew out. So there was so many key moments throughout that renovation where we were like, yeah, this isn't as easy as we first thought, right? And yeah, I mean, following that, we just pursued with how things were going and took those learnings. We were fortunate enough that even in the following year, when it came to refinancing, we were like, oh, let's see if we can better our rates.
Yeah.
But when the valuations came in, again, with the property being renovated and a bit of market movement, it actually went up in value. And so it increased quite substantially. I think it went up by about 150 or 160,000.
What year was this?
This
was end of 2013.
Yeah.
All right. So it's good timing to buy in Western Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we were able to leverage that and purchase pretty much before I buy it.
So yeah, we essentially had another 2 deposits for our next 2 purchases.
Yeah,
which were both in Queensland.
Yeah, and we flew to the location.
We were like, oh, we need to start diversifying. We can't just constantly invest in New South Wales, perhaps.
But the amount of people that I know that live in Sydney and had like one in Western Sydney in 2013 or 14, and then were like, Brisbane's about to boom, and then they bought like 2 or 3 there, and then Brisbane did nothing, and then Sydney went up like double. They're like, just shoot me now.
Yeah. And so, because at the time we didn't have the same sort of processes that we have today, we were like, well, how do we do our due diligence? Yeah. The only way we do is
for the ground.
We need to fly there and
right.
chat with the people on the ground, get a feel for the suburb. And yeah, we came across 2 particular properties that we liked and put in an offer, and essentially they got accepted.
And then I guess that brings us to 2015. Yeah, around when we were getting married, we did a granny flat on the purchase that we built in Wentworthville.
So in Sydney. So yeah, just before we got married, we decided that we were going to build a granny flat to boost our cash flow.
Yeah. Yes.
And there was another key lesson that I learned, because I was adamant that, again, I'd learned a lot from the renovation. I could do an owner-builder granny flat. So to save costs, we'd factored in a budget. And again, the whole process, the timing of it was impeccable. It was literally, we started it 6 months before we were getting married, and we probably finished it about a month beforehand. So there was a lot of stress,
right,
high level, but again, we were like,
you just learn from it. Like, it's sort of like we were novice at that stage.
Sure.
You'll learn how you were learning from your mistakes. You were learning how you were going, kind of thing. And then I guess that brings us to.
And just on that, can I just interrupt you? Like, how much did that granny flat cost you? And do you have a sense of how much it revalued up? Like, did you make equity out of that, or if it cost you 100 grand or 120, did it just increase the value by 120?
Yeah. So overall cost for us as an owner builder was 75K. So relative to the quotes that we were getting at the time, I think granny flats were in that sort of vicinity between like 110, 130. So for me, that was almost like another deposit for a property. And that was my motive as to, okay, well, I feel like I've got the knowledge, the trade experience, and I've got a few contacts where I called in plumbers and carpenters and all that to assist. And that's how we're able to bring those costs down.
Right. So that was a good decision then. You made some equity, and it obviously improved your cash flows as well.
Yeah, it did. It certainly did. I mean, at the time, I think the granny flat was... The main house was getting about 500 a week, and then the granny flat was getting about 320.
Yeah, it was a good move back then.
Yeah, so it allowed us to be able to move forward.
Sure. Makes sense. And just before you go on, I'm just trying to think of what people want to know. And I'm just going to ask you one more question.
Oh.
You know, when you were flying up to Queensland or Brisbane and having chats and I don't know, getting to know the suburb, like, what does that mean? Were you talking to real estate agents, or were you like talking to the local florist or coffee shop?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. So talking to real estate agents and property managers.
Yeah.
But it was also back then, I guess I didn't have the data and like all the, I guess, insight that I have now, right? But I would literally be marking like, where's the housing commission kind of a thing on an actual map.
Oh, you'd be driving around and be like, that's housing commission.
Well, like
X marks
sort
the
of
spot.
knowing it from, I guess, the locals, where are the good streets, where are the bad streets, where are the more owner-op streets, and where are the favourable streets, and then sort of you get to know the area of like, okay, there's a school down the road, there's a hospital down the road, or, so that you sort of, the landmarks,
Sure. I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, Nicole, so don't mind me, but like, how's that a bad thing? Because, like, all that sounds like really good due diligence.
Oh, it's not a bad thing. It's just
super time consuming.
You can now do it off Google probably and
Sure.
getting off the phone call and actually talking to people. But it's, I think it's an emotional thing, you know, you just got to let it go if that's what you believe in. You know?
It comes down to anything really. When you do something for the first time, you're super nervous about it, and you want to be extra cautious that you'll go to extremes to be able to, I guess, fulfill that gap that you have. And so that was the way that we were like, well, that's how we understand it to be. So that's what we did.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And it gave you confidence at the time, but not to put words in your mouth. In hindsight, you probably could have achieved all that and more in a much more condensed period of time just over the phone from Sydney, and not giving your money to Virgin or Jetstar or Qantas or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, we kind of like turned it into a little bit of a trip, but yeah, like we weren't just adamant that that's all we were going to do. Like, it gave us an opportunity to go there as well. And just, I mean, I definitely agree with you in that front that there's far more effective resources available at your disposal in today's day and age.
So I think technology has changed too now.
It has.
Right?
Certainly has.
Yeah. Even the courses that we were doing in the past versus what's available now, you had to go in to do the course. You couldn't just do it online, you know. Like, yeah. And it was like you could only speak to whoever you wanted to speak to face because like that's what was available then. You had to do it. You had that time with them during that course, you know, or something. So it's sort of, I think times have changed for an investor as well. So yeah, I don't know.
You're so right. I mean, in 2011, when I bought my first one in East Gosford, I was in Sydney at the time, and I remember calling the property manager and asking them, like, oh, hey, do you guys do like inspections? Like, I was like high pitched, like kind of nervous. And they were like, no one's ever asked us that before. It's okay, we'll do it, you know? And I was like, oh, cool. That means I don't have to drive up to Newcastle or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was like, that sparked it for me. I was like, property managers, they can be really helpful. But yeah, I guess back in the day, you know, for some people, it builds confidence to go see the place. I never did it, but you know, the different strokes are different folks for sure. Sorry, please carry on. I interrupted that thought bubble.
No, I like it.
I think it's valuable. I reckon it's so valuable. Like now looking at it, now when we're purchasing, do we go out to no, we actually have property managers and we have our own trading that we trust as well, that will go out and give us the real fine points of what it is that you're getting out of that property. Purely because the property manager is the one that's going to be managing the property anyway. Yeah. They know where the rentals start from, right? So if you do add to that property, and then the trades, well, Michael's so good at trade lingo, and so when speaking to trades, when he gets them out to do any type of due diligence on the property or a FISO or something like that, it's very, very concrete in the sense that he knows what he wants. And they can brainstorm as well. So that's mighty. Like I'm jumping now, you know, to our knowledge now versus what our knowledge was back then. And I think it's like you said, we're building that confidence. And I would say, you know, if that's a level for somebody to build their confidence, then go do it. But yeah, like you said, right now, I would say it's just, you don't need to.
Sure. Okay. Please carry on.
Yeah. And so then following, once where were we? We were
Queensland. So now we're going
2016 or thereabouts. Yeah. So at that point, Nicole's parents were considering relocating.
They were, yeah.
So moving from Sydney to purchase themselves a retirement up on the Central Coast, so past Newcastle. And one particular weekend, we were like, oh, let's go check out where they're looking at to invest. And we stopped by Lake Macquarie just to catch some lunch. And we just so happened to drive past the property that had a open for inspection sign. So naturally inclined, Nicole and I were like, well, let's go check it out.
We stopped there because you sort of knew that there was a developer in that area too.
Yeah, so that's a great point. So a bit of context. there was a developer in the area that was selling developed land, brand new 4-bedroom houses in the sort of price point of mid to high fives. And that sparked my interest as to wanting to detour by there just to get a feel of the area. And yeah, as I was saying that when we stumbled upon this property, we were like, yeah, we'll go in, have a look. We had a chat with the agent, and it turned out that this particular property was a distressed repossession sale, meaning that the vendor, for whatever reasons, couldn't afford to hold on to the property. And so once we got to the farm, which is where the parents were intending, we basically sat down and went into research mode. Now, from our findings, we found that the properties in the area of established properties were in that sort of mid to high $300,000 price point. And I was more trying to bridge the gap why an established property is valued in that sort of price range versus a new one. I mean, in terms of land component, this property was on
much bigger land,
1,200 square meters versus the 600 square meter that the new house was on. And I was like, wow, that's such a large discrepancy. And so on top of that, I had envisioned that this particular property, the way it was positioned towards the front of the lot, we could subdivide because similar enough, the neighboring property had done just that. So I was like, right, we can pick this up at a relatively good price, then we're laughing. And so we were super interested and we're ready to go to the auction, but essentially there was one problem. So the day of the auction just so happened to be the day that Nicole and I were flying away to the US to celebrate our 1-year wedding anniversary.
Okay.
And so there are a couple of things that we had to do in the pipeline in terms of getting your...
Oh, yeah, my mom, power of attorney. So, yeah, we learned that somebody else can purchase property for you.
Okay.
Yeah, we basically put all that in motion, and we didn't know whether or not we'd know how the auction went, essentially, till we got there. And so...
As in, you weren't on the phone with her, she just had complete control.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
no, go on.
So we pretty much we didn't know until we got onto the plane.
Yeah, so prior to that, we basically gave her a brief as to where our limit was, and said, look, if it falls within this range, then we're happy to bid to our limit. And we just, knowing that the time of the auction, we would be somewhere over the Pacific, we just weren't sure when we'd find out.
Sure.
But yeah, we got onto the plane and they actually had...
They had Wi-Fi.
Back in the day. Okay.
Yeah, and so I was going above and beyond to try. I get your Wi-Fi password. I really want to make a phone call. And with luck, behold, we actually were live on the auction throughout it.
That's so cool.
On the plane. So as soon as the hammer went and we knew we'd bought it, we were like, yes, what an amazing stunt day.
Like high-fiving all the other passengers.
Yeah, pretty much. So we were like super pumped.
Yeah.
And so we went on our holiday. We then did our thing and came back. And again, similar enough, this property was tied. So the intent was to basically tidy it up. We spent 30-odd thousand to add a bedroom, redo the toilet, and within 3 months, that property increased in value, which then allowed us to leverage in refinance leverage to buy the next 2 properties.
Yeah.
Right. So cool. I mean, you guys definitely don't, you like a little bit of risk in your life. Let's just say that. Yeah, we had a bit of calculated risk.
This is
Right. Life is different before kids, right?
I could do overtime, and Michael, you were a tradie, so tradies are unlimited sometimes, right?
Yeah, I suppose you don't realise how much time you have available at your fingertips until kids come into the picture.
But yeah, I guess this is where it changed, right?
Yeah. In 2017, we had 8 investment properties. We then realized quickly that we became heavily negatively geared. I'm talking $700 to $750 a week, which equates to approximately $40,000.
Oh, wow. This is despite the granny flat cash flow and despite buying like relatively inexpensive properties.
Yeah. And also throughout that same period, Nicole was pregnant with our firstborn.
Okay.
And I was working full-time, long hours in what I look back now as a really toxic work environment.
Yeah.
And so we knew we had cash flow woes.
Yeah.
And we both...
Yeah, we had a lot of pain for that. Like, I had to go back. Like, my maternity leave was, I had to go back at 9 months. We couldn't afford me to go for a whole year without pay or anything like that. It was like, no, we need the cash to keep going. And I think that's where a lot of people probably struggle to understand property investing, right? You can't just not have your income coming in, I guess.
Yeah. It's
What's the lesson from that? Because like on the face of it, you'd say to someone, oh, hey, by the time we have our first kid, we've got 8 properties, and people will be like, you're winning at life, you know, but inside you're like a little bit anxious about the cash flow. Like, I generally don't know the answer, so I'll ask it anyway. Like, did you just forget to do cash flow planning, or did you do it and something like there was a curveball, or like what happened?
So just as you bring this up, so then what happened was to alleviate the cash flow, at the time we didn't have spreadsheets. We didn't really have a strategy.
Yeah, strategy. That's the problem.
And so we were like, how can we fix this? So we decided to engage a buyer's agent with the intent to secure a commercial property to essentially relieve all our cash flow issues. What we realized soon after was that was a mistake, which then became a big snowball effect, because by the end of 2017, early into 2018, APRA introduced the Royal Commission to change lending policies, and long and behold, we became financially stuck. We couldn't move forward.
And did you end up buying a commercial place by then?
Yes, we did.
Do you mind, like, where is it? How much did you buy it for? What kind of yield, like that kind of thing?
Queensland, it was low price point entry, like I'm talking that 300K range.
Right.
And the yield was average. I mean, I didn't really know commercial property to the extent that I know today, but we were sold on things like the fact that all expenses are paid by the tenant, and that there would be no maintenance costs. Yeah. But that then incorporated with the particular tenant we had, they basically were renting back for a 12-month period in the lead up to COVID, and they themselves had a gym at the time. And so little did we know what effects were going to come of this in the following year.
Right.
I guess that's where I learned gross, where people talk about the gross yield versus the net yield, right? No one really likes to talk about net yields, and this is all me and Michael now work off is net yield. But everyone talks about gross yield. So it sounded great because I think they were saying, well, the pitching, it was like a 7 to 8% yield.
Rental yield, yeah.
It ended up being like a 4 to 5% like net yield or something. And for a commercial, it's not that.
It's not what you'd expect from a commercial.
Certainly not. I mean, you might expect that in some places now, 2024, but certainly not many years ago. And I don't know if you guys agree with this, but like my experience is, even if it is a 6% net yield in a commercial property, depends what the definition of net is. Sometimes it excludes property management, it includes like make good clauses, it excludes like even property management. I didn't realize this until I bought my first commercial property. I was like, when they find you a new tenant, they take like 15% of the whole year's income. Like, this is not net. Like, I have to pay for this. And it's just, it's crazy. Even in commercial, like 6% net can be like you said, Nicole, like really 4%.
Yeah. Really. And then like now when I hear people's deals, I'm like, so what type of yield really is it, like in the sense that, like you said, right?
To understand that. So as a result of becoming stuck, well, there wasn't really too much we could do. Everyone was telling us to just increase our income by a ridiculous amount. And I was like, well, that's just not going to happen. So we decided to get super heavily educated and consume as much content as we could. Yeah. Then I saw that people were having spreadsheets, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to build a spreadsheet. And then I went to going to like an extent of having a really granular level, understanding all the expenses, all the percentages along the way, and the clips to really work out what a net yield was. And I did that across all our properties. And then really we then determined, okay, well, we know what's doing well, what's not. And then we had a bit more time because in 2019, our second child was born, which is our daughter. And at that stage, over the sort of that 2 to 3 year period, we began cleaning up our portfolio. To basically leverage and be able to get out of that financial ceiling that we'd hit.
And then getting up, like understanding what the serviceability, in the sense that what affects your borrowing capacity. I still had HEX debt. I actually didn't know then that the HEX debt would affect it so much, and it wasn't like an extensive HEX debt. So it was like, pay that, like, Nick, you need to pay that, and that was one of our brokers telling us that, you know. Yeah,
well, that actually leads me to a very interesting point. So at that point, every single purchase we had done was in our personal names, and so debt to income ratio became a real thing for us. And I had to unpack that as to, if the lenders are not allowing us to borrow more, like, why is that? And work out what is it that we need to change. And then, that took us a little while in terms of cleaning things up. So,
and then also we talked to multiple brokers, by the way. We talked to multiple accountants as well, and we found our team.
Yeah. So we went down that path. We ended up having to sell some properties to free up not only the cash flow burden, but also unlock some equity. And then also we're considering as to, well, do we hold on to some? Do we sell? And after doing that, we had a surplus amount of funds. Then we were like, well, because of that purchase we did in Lake Macquarie, we started the process in getting that subdivided.
Right.
And we also considered selling another property of ours, Victoria. But the timing of it was impeccable, in the sense that I came across someone who basically suggested, well, maybe you don't have to sell. Perhaps you can reconfigure the arrangement into a rooming house.
Yeah, Michael.
And so I was staring down the barrel of, do we sell and have to pay capital gains tax plus all the other costs associated with the property, or do we tap into some of the equity and leverage that to convert it into a rooming house, which is essentially what we did.
Yeah. Right. That was actually a pretty fruitful decision. So we went from like a 3-bedroom that was it had a
3-bedroom, 3 bathroom.
Yeah, but $350 rent.
Yeah, it was
a week.
$350 per week.
Yeah, and then we ended up making it into a 4-unit micro apartment. So that pretty much 4 times
gave us a 4x return
to like $1,400 per week. So
so that really turned
amazing. What was that experience like? Because I've never done rooming myself. I've been tempted, but what really puts me off is that, I mean, apart from how banks perceive it and things like that, what puts me off is that it's kind of like quite active as a strategy. Yes, you can get property managers that specialize in that, but there's a lot of tenant attrition, maintenance fees are higher, insurance is higher, and it just kind of put me off. But I've never done it, so I'd love to hear from you. Like, it clearly was fruitful. Would you do it again, or did you do it again, or what was your experience like?
Yeah, look, we had a very positive experience, considering how eventful our journey was leading to that point. And I do agree with what you're saying. I mean, insurances are higher.
And only one insurer.
there's only a set amount, I think 3 insurers across the country that will insure rooming houses. And yes, lenders definitely look at rooming houses at a different perspective. What I mean by that is they'll look at it more on a commercial valuation basis than a residential, because there's an element of risk associated with that.
And yeah, not all property managers will take them on
as well. Not all property managers are fit to be able to know how to not only screen the particular tenants, because in essence you need to have every tenant somewhat flow. You just can't have one person who's a professional working 5 days a week and then someone else is on no jobless basically. You got to make sure that there's harmony within the property.
Exactly.
Part of that is making sure that when the tenant applications come through, that someone's got a process to revise and make sure that the person is the right fit. Mm-hmm. Other things to consider is, property management fees are definitely higher. I think we're paying 12%. Mm-hmm. But what that includes is basically everything, in the sense that if at any stage a tenant leaves, we're not hit with letting fees or anything as such. It's an inclusive package.
Got it. That's not so bad. It's pretty reasonable. I mean, in Perth, you can pay up to that just for a normal house. So it's not
exactly. Yeah. And so, that was really good. And then after we did all the numbers, it still worked out very favorable. So we were like, well, we're going to pull the trigger on this, and had it now for a few years. And between tenancies, I mean, it might take 2 to 3 weeks to fill a particular room, but at the end of the day, we've diversified to 4 separate rental incomes, and even if one is vacant, like, we're still 3xing our return relative to what we had prior.
Yeah,
that's good.
All right. So I think, in a nutshell,
from that point on,
it made us begin to refine our processes, our methodologies, our strategies. We've gone from a novice investor to an intermediate investor to probably, I would say, because we were able to flip that negatively geared portfolio to one that we could technically then keep going, right? We're able to get out of that hole. I think you'd probably put us then into more of an advanced investor. And that mindset of keep going and growing was probably the endurance that we had in the game. And I think that's the most important thing that you can ever have, is endurance, right? But I think our strategy is the value add perspective of, we just don't buy and hold. We have some type of value add to our purchases. Not all, but to most of our purchases is what made us be able to leverage and grow.
Yeah, we found that through some of those particular strategies, we just had a fruitful experience.
Yeah, and it's the renovations, right? We've done cosmetic and structural. Great. People have done that too, but we've refined our processes to having a template that we can go off, that we don't overcapitalize, we don't put emotions into it whatsoever. We've learned to make clear, every dollar spent, you get 3 times return. So for every dollar, $3 back. Don't go overcapitalizing. So 10% of the purchase price is a rule of thumb for the reno kind of thing.
Don't overspend. Yeah.
Granny flats, great for cash flow. Different states have different, rules, and make sure you just, if you want to put a granny flat onto the house that you're purchasing, just make sure you can. Make sure that there's no sewer at the back. Make sure that there's easements, or there's nothing that's going to make you not be able to, or that you'll have extra costs.
And that stuff is hard because you won't even know if you want to do a granny flat if you're a newbie investor. And so even as something as simple as the sewer, you just have to go to Dial Before You Dig. Let's say you're in Queensland, the website's free. It tells you, is there a sewage line in the backyard? But you don't even know to check that because you don't even know what a granny flat is. You know what this is with the due diligence.
On their website will have council maps. So they'll have maps that you can see any kind of electrical line.
Where any of the services.
So, you just got to know that that's available to you. And now online, it's amazing what you can find, I guess. And then, you know, we've done small developments as well. Like the retain and build is sort of what we like. And the reason why we like that is purely because we're creating more value because you're manufacturing you're essentially manufacturing equity.
So like with that property that we secured in Lake Macquarie, we bought the land at essentially wholesale price with the property on there, and with how the market went on with the years that followed, it increased, and we were then able to build a brand new lot on the back. So we didn't have to pay the land component. All we had to pay was the build cost. And so once that was finalized and subdivided, all of a sudden we've got 2 properties with 2 titles, and all of a sudden, we've been able to manufacture some serious equity.
But also during the construction construction period, you have somebody renting the front property, so you're not like dry, right?
Sure.
Really like...
Yeah, you don't have those holding costs essentially burning a hole in your pocket.
Right. Yeah, Paul Macquarie property sounds pretty perfect, to be honest, because it had that subdivision value add potential. And it was just, I think it was just bought at the perfect time. It's probably more than doubled. And
it is one of our strong assets, and we have actually put a granny flat on it as well.
So,
there you go. High income streams.
So I was super ambitious when I was speaking with the town planners about this, because I was optimistic that maybe we could get 3 separate dwellings on the property, and they were like, no, you can't do that. I said, well, what's the next best thing? And then he goes, look, given the size being 1,200 squares, we can make the battle axe block as small as we can, essentially allowing the front lot to have 580 or thereabouts, whatever it was. Right. And what allowed us was that it allowed us to be able to put a granny flat in between the front property and the rear property.
Yeah.
Right.
And we leveraged the equity that we gained from the subdivision to then fund that granny flat. So every time we're just trying to leverage what we've done to be able to get us to the next position.
Yeah, I think it needs to be said as well. Like, I didn't hear you say before that Port Macquarie one, it's not like you'd done already half a dozen subdivisions. Like you're getting these results because you're finding the right people through trial and error, and you're asking the right questions. And I just want that point to hit home to everyone, because it can be very easy for someone to passively listen and watch this and say like, oh, yeah, but Michael's a tradie. Like, you know, he kind of just knows this stuff, or Nicole just kind of knows this stuff or whatever. But like, you genuinely didn't. Like, you were like a newbie developer. You could, I don't know if that's a
yeah.
But you asked the question, and unless you ask the question to the town planner, they're not going to off their own bat be like, oh, by the way, I can make you some money if we do this, then you can get a granny flat and 3 income streams from the same, you know, initial block. No one's going to care about you. You have to ask that. Well, you did. And I think credit goes to you because of that. And I'm also getting a sense that if you had not had this constant value add strategy, whether it's renovation, granny flat, subdivision, and you're rooming, you could have easily sold that house, but instead you decided to make it a multiple income sort of factory. Not factory, that's a metaphor, but you know what I'm saying? Like, if you had not done that, you wouldn't be in this position you are right now. And that's a great lesson to me and for everyone else as well, that sure, you can be a buy and hold investor, passive, and that's completely fine if, you know, you don't care, you don't have enough time or whatever. And that will get you out of your rat race, but it'll just take a long time. But you can get there quicker and more in an accelerated fashion if you put in some sweat equity or you do some value add. And I think there's too many people who sort of doubt themselves and think, I can't do that. That sounds really overwhelming. That sounds like you need to be a professional. That sounds like you need to have background in electrician or some sort of trade to be able to achieve those outcomes. But you don't. Like, I know that gave you a big leg up being in trade and having those contacts, but anyone can do it. You know, they might make a few more mistakes, but everyone can do it.
Yeah, most definitely.
So those are some things that I took out, which is commendable to your effort for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, and then I guess 2020 No, 20.
Yeah, so after we sort of cleaned that up and did that, COVID hit, and we began helping friends and family throughout that period, because they'd obviously seen that we've been in this space for a little while and they saw what we were doing. And then...
Yeah, look, I came across a really sad story. One of my friends from nursing was pretty much taken down like a rabbit hole in her purchase. It was a lot of, but you need to put this extra cost in and this extra cost in. And she was like, I thought it was all done prior the purchase. So it was a lot of red flags, and that got me going, just super angry, and then going, you know what, you need to have a conveyancer that's not linked to whoever you're going and purchasing through, and sent her to our people, which sort of, I guess, made me go, oh my goodness, we have a team.
Yeah, and I guess off the back of that, there was a suggestion made as to, well, you guys have been doing this for a little while and you seem to be doing okay at it. Why don't you turn it into a business? And so we were like, why don't we? And so in 2022, we decided, well, let's do our real estate license. And soon after that, we launched a business.
Yeah.
And I think that's how some of the best businesses start, right? It's just by osmosis. It's like you've already gone through the trials and tribulations, and it's like other people having to tell you that you're an expert and you should perhaps start helping people. I don't want to say that's necessarily what happened to you, but that's exactly what happened to me. And you don't have confidence in yourself, but then enough people tell you that you can do it for them, that it's like, yeah I'm actually half decent at this. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And so
organically.
Yeah, and so once we started that, we were gaining clients. I was still on a mission. We were both really.
No, we're always on a mission
to keep growing our knowledge base. And I think that's when I came across some of your videos on YouTube. And so started to follow your content. And the value that you were provided. I mean, it seemed like you were a genuine and humble individual, and Nicole and I, we share those calls.
How did that come across when you're like, you're budding buyer's agents, and then you have this guy on YouTube saying, don't use a buyer's agent?
It was for some of the points you're saying, I think. We were like, I could say.
Well, to be completely transparent, I mean, I think that's what sparked our interest, that you had a dislike for buyer's agents. And I was like, well, this could be interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then we were like, after a while, we're like, let's just sign up. Like, what's the worst that can happen? We might learn a thing or two and perhaps improve. And so
we did.
So we did. It added metrics, refined the way we were analyzing data points, topping up our knowledge. And that, with what we already knew from the value add side of things, was able to optimize our investment strategy, meaning that not only are we targeting high growth areas from capital and rental growth, but emerging markets, and that embedded with some of the value add knowledge
that
we have. Now we look for opportunities that have that embedded value add in them. So what it's shown us is that you can really supercharge your results. And
we were able to.
And I guess in addition to that, there were some things that helped us streamline and eliminate things like boots on the ground, like when we had done our initial visit to Queensland. So
it's always a little bit humbling, you know, when people who have already been very experienced in their investing, they do the course, and it's almost like, why are you guys doing my course? Like, you already know how to develop, you already know how to subdivide, you already have bought, so many properties. But the conclusion I've sort of come to myself is these people do it because they want to layer the strategies. They already know how to manufacture value, but then if they can create an underpinning underneath that, which is just using data to find, good income and good growth suburbs, short term, medium term, and long term, and then they can add their own expertise of value add, then it's like the best of both worlds. I remember I used to get calls years and years ago from developers, and I felt like, what's that word? Self-sabotage. I was like, I used to tell them, I'm like, I don't think you need my course. And like many of them turned away because of that. But I think in hindsight, it could have added value to them because they didn't know how to pick the next suburb, but they knew how to make money from a existing title block or site. But if combining the two, I think is very powerful. So after this, after doing the course, how many more properties have you bought? We probably don't have time to go into like every single one of them, but how has it gone since that time?
Yeah, so
pretty much we've purchased.
No, I mean, since the course, we've purchased a lot more properties, but I don't know whether we want to go down the fact of for our own portfolio, for clients, because in turn, I mean, it streamlined the way we look at it at a whole. So we basically, the same way we plan for purchases for ourselves is now how we plan out the purchases for our clients, and in turn, basically replicating and repeating, rinse and repeat.
Yeah, brilliant.
We know what we're going to be doing to the property prior to purchase, and I think that's the most important thing to do when you're an investor, especially if you want to go be an active investor. Know exactly all the due diligence that need to go behind in knowing what you're going to be doing with that land. If you're going to be doing something with that land or with that house, doing your course, also educated financially in the sense of structuring and strategies. I think that's really important. The broker that you're using, are they an investor-based broker, or are they just doing mortgages and they're not really thinking of investing strategy? If you're at that point that you need an accountant on board, does your accountant understand property investing?
Yeah.
And if you have a financial planner, are they a financial planner that understands property as well, or are they a salesperson, typically speaking, that is selling you? I don't know.
I'm actually keen to get your input from I guess if you've dealt with financial planners, because from my experience, a lot of them tend to have their agenda as to pushing towards stocks and not really understanding overly too much about property. Do you feel that you've had similar experiences?
I think so. Like in my own experiences, because when you want to create wealth, people say go see a financial planner. And so I did on multiple occasions, but I find that their expertise lies in finding the right insurances as per your personal situation. They're also quite useful if you're in your latter years and you want to do superannuation planning and making sure things like, can I get the pension if I'm asset tested this way, or how can I maneuver my assets or whatever to get my annuity, like that kind of thing, which kind of goes over my head, to be honest, from a structuring perspective. They're also, they're brokers in terms of they recommend mutual funds, managed funds, funds of funds, and stocks and things like that. But I don't think that's where their expertise lies, because I used to work at an investment bank, and, investment bankers spend 90 hours a week looking at this stuff. Financial planners spend 2 hours a week, maybe 2 hours a day. But at the same time, I don't want to poo-poo them too much, because I have so many financial planners and clients, and they're the first ones to very quickly point out to me that, hey, PK, that's not true for all financial planners, and there are actually some that are terrific and actually have property expertise as well, and won't just recommend a property for tax reasons, won't just recommend a property because they're getting a kickback, even though most of them do. Like in any profession, I think there's some solid financial planners, but still to synergize everything, my honest opinion is that if you want to use real estate as your prime vehicle for retirement planning and wealth creation, then you don't need a financial planner. But if you're the type of person that, you're not really interested in knowledge accumulation and you just want to outsource, then, it's probably good to see a financial planner at some stage, especially closer to retirement. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with that, but that's kind of my honest thoughts.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, there's a time and place for everyone in their journey.
Agreed.
Yeah. No, but I think that's a really good solid point that you made around, you need to have the right people in your team and people that are sort of quantitative, have data based insights. And even as you guys, you said you've streamlined your process, so you know exactly what you're doing with the property, why you're buying there, what value add you're providing. Because I think, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And so, who cares about what PK says? Who cares about what Michael says? It's only the data that we're leaning on that is actually valuable, and the experience as well, of course. So I think that's a terrific thing. In terms of your portfolio, and once again, please let me know if you're not comfortable sharing, and that's completely okay. But now you have, I think, if I can remember, 11 titles, 17 rentals or streams of income. Do you have a sense of like total portfolio worth? What's your LVR? What's your total sort of positive cash flow position? And I think it's also worth saying, whilst while you answer that, just because you only have 20K passive income or 50K passive income or 100K passive income, that doesn't mean that you're not successful or successful. I think people may hear stories of someone who's been investing for 10 years or something and be like, oh, they've only got like 40K passive income. Like, is that really worth it, all that effort? But it's like, no, you have to see the forest from the trees. Now that they've done all this legwork, give it another 10 years for the fruit to ripen, and that 40K becomes 200K or something like that.
Yeah.
So what is kind of a question, but what's your what's your personal finances look like?
Fine. So we pretty much the approximate value for the portfolio stands at,
I think, about 7.5 mil from when we checked. Our LVR, according from my spreadsheet, because it literally looks at everything now, was about 60%. I think that's where we're about. But
solid.
So yeah, we're in a pretty favourable position at the moment. We're going through a bit of a refinance because there are some properties that we're looking at adding value to. So our cash flow situation might be a bit skewed, but it's in and around that 6-figure mark.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty decent.
We're also transferring some into from our own names.
Yeah. Restructuring. So
sure.
Part of that is the rooming house, as an example. So we bought that in our personal names at the time, but given the fact it's now very heavily cash flow positive, we're now in a position where, because it's in our individual names and our individual tax brackets nominated higher, it actually made financial sense to discuss things with the accountant as to what it would look like if we were to transfer it into a discretionary trust. The reason for that is we aim to hold it till the end of time, essentially. And some of the things that we had to consider was, well, in a discretionary trust, the tax bracket is lower. What the payback period in doing so, I mean, you've got to allow for capital gain, you've got to allow for stamp duty and paying back all the depreciation that you claim back from the government. So there was a lot of back and forth with the accountant to make it actually, to make it determine whether it's viable. So yeah, that was something else that's happening as well.
Right, it's a tough decision. What I think is notable is that you guys have been fairly emotionless about your real estate decisions. Like, you've bought, sold properties, you've really just lent on the numbers, especially sort of halfway on from your journey. You've kind of been like, okay, let's get strategic, let's just take the emotion out of it and let's just go for it. And that's like, it's not easy to do, not least with 3 kids now and well, a growing family.
Well, I always say when you're growing a property portfolio, you got to treat it like a business. Like, it's about the returns, it's about the numbers, it's about the mathematics behind it. Nothing short of it, really.
Yeah. Okay, we probably have to end it there. I could sort of go down rabbit holes and explore other things forever. But I just want to ask you one last question. For someone who is, let's go here. For someone who's got already a few properties and, I don't know, for whatever reason, they're underperforming or they haven't been performing as well as they ought to have, and they're like, I've tried property investing. I might have done it myself, might have used a buyer's agent, whatever. I don't know if it's really for me. Like it's a lot of work. I've made mistakes. I'd rather just chuck it into, the ASX 200 and we'll see I'll see how it goes. This is not like a share versus property question, but just like a general mindset question. What would you say to folks like that?
I mean, what I'm only basing this off our experience, and when I say that is get educated and always maintain that growth mindset. I mean, when we hit that roadblock, I knew there were still plenty of investors that had already cracked the ceiling of 10 plus properties. So I was like, well, they've done it. They must have worked out a way to get there. It's not that they stumbled across it by accident. So one of the things I was like telling myself and Nicole is we got to start thinking like a top 1% investor. And at the end of the day, I feel based on our experience, like the earlier you start, the bigger advantage you'll have in the long run, as you touched on earlier.
Yeah, so it's just get educated, know your finances as well. Start with talking to anyone and everyone you can to sort of get a broader perspective of maybe there's something in your mindset that is just holding you behind as well. Like think outside the box. We did for one of our purchases, and that was that rooming house, for instance. But you don't have to go down those kind of strategies if it's not for you, but you can explore different types of ways that could get you unstuck if that's what's happening. And I think community as well, putting yourself in a community that can help you brainstorm. Just take on a bit of information that you didn't even know of. But yeah, like Michael said, having that growth mindset, start thinking like that 1% investor. What would that 1% investor do versus just what you're thinking right now might be a pinnacle point for you too. And get your goals in line. Make sure that you have a strategy that's going to get you there. So reverse engineer it.
Yeah, I feel that's like if an investor's gotten to that stage where they've got a few properties under their belt and all of a sudden they become stuck, I genuinely believe that perhaps maybe the strategy wasn't necessarily the right one, or maybe there was no strategy. I'm not sure about your own personal journey, but yeah, it took us a while before we were like, well, we needed to implement and refine a strategy to allow us to keep going and progress, because we too got stuck. And so, yeah, determining, what kind of investment's going to be right for you, determining whether you want a negative gear, understand if you want to do positive gear, and are you going to rely on the big four banks, or are you going to use second tier, third tier lenders? I mean, that is a whole process.
Sure.
And perhaps
question. Don't forget to ask questions. And if you're not getting the answers from that broker, that whoever you're asking questions to,
make sure
pick up the phone and call someone else.
I'd probably say, make sure you understand what you're investing in. Away from that.
Right. So many takeaways that you guys shared, and I think my biggest takeaway from your entire journey is just that how important strategy is. I mean, I definitely know when I was a first-time property investor, what rang in my head was like hotspot. Where should I invest? But that's like not even important. What is important is lending strategy, your portfolio strategy, structuring strategy, all this sort of thing. Invest in the unsexy stuff like that, and then things like hotspots can come later. Like it'll take care of itself. But no, I'm truly humbled that I definitely can't take any credit whatsoever for anything that you guys have done, but I'm very happy to have played my small little part in whatever way that I have, and I have to congratulate you on not only constantly pivoting and like just getting yourself out of jail again and again and again, but also landing yourself in such a strong financial position. I didn't realize that you had such a strong passive income outcome, and that's a testament to you. And like you said at the start, Michael, you're on modest income. But I'm not talking to an investment banker here. I'm not talking to a surgeon or some business owner that makes millions of dollars every year. I'm talking to like normal people that have just hustled. And I know definitely when you came to my event in Sydney last year, I'm looking at you, Nicole, You're like the most cheerful, outgoing, loud in a good way person in the room. And I think that sort of speaks to kind of like the mindset that you need. Like, just put yourself out there. There are others who have been successful in real estate. Why can't I? Why can't you? Sure, we all can't get the same level of success, but do the best with what you have. But don't leave any money on the table. And I don't think you guys have left any money on the table. And because you've streamlined your processes and data and your layered stack strategy now, you're helping so many others. And I always say, and I think people misconstrue me, I genuinely believe that most buyer's agents are genuinely not worth it. In fact, I'll be happy to put a figure on that and say 90% plus. But I always say, and somehow this bit gets edited out, that some are actually really good, And if you don't have any time because of various reasons, or no interest in learning and educating, then there are some decent people left in the world, and you guys are amongst them. But I still think, like, I don't even care about my course. I still think people should get educated.
Yeah.
You can only be yourself, right? And like, we love property. People have passion.
It's just provided us with options. I mean, now that we have a family, rather than being forced to do something like a 9 to 5 that you might not necessarily enjoy, we do it purely because we enjoy it and the opportunities that it can bring to people's lives.
Yeah, and we want to help change people's lives as well. Like, we want to get people through until their goals. Let's get their.
That's awesome. Well, you'll have as your business grows and your kids grow, you're going to have like a strong team, a family team of buyers agents, and little kids that are going to be like typing away on their spreadsheets in 5 or 6 years' time. I don't know. That didn't come out as well as I thought it in my head. Sounds a bit like slave labor, but anyway. But no, that was great. I was talking to a client yesterday, and she was saying her 8-year-old was asked to do like a painting at school, like a picture, and he drew one house after another house after another house, and the teacher was like, "What have you drawn?" And this 8-year-old, I'm not making this up, 8-year-old was like, "Well, my mum's a property investor, and what you can do is you can buy one house and take the equity and buy another one. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm getting to 10 houses." And so
that is amazing.
Like, how amazing is that? She was talking about the son, the 8-year-old, he was talking about equity. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And to be able to do that for your kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
You should keep that.
Yeah. 100%. No, we'll wrap it up there. This was a super long interview, but hopefully people are still with us and got a ton of value. But thank you so much, Michael and Nicole. You guys have been awesome.
Thank you, PK.
Thanks, PK. Thanks for having us on.
I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
100%. And thank you, everyone, for listening wherever you are. There's like more than, I don't even know, 110, 120 of these client interviews on my client results playlist. But I honestly don't care if you do my course or not, but at least go through and watch and listen to them, because you'll learn so much. You'll become educated and inspired to take the next step for yourself, whatever that may be. Thank you again, guys.
Oh, thanks,
PK.